1466. A warrior prince fiercely defends his nation. His experience, boldness, and energy grants the Albanians 2 quick victories. They can now enjoy a few months of peace. But the storm is fast approaching. It is thought that Mehmed was planning a new attack on Albania. For his nation, the diplomat Pal Anjali brought new help from Venice. The Republic sent 300 Italian mercenaries to Scanderbeg. In addition, they provided 4 bombards, 20 barrels of gunpowder, and 10 springboards. Also 3,000 ducats to recruit the locals. With such modest help, Scanderbeg prepared for war. At the beginning of May, it became clear that Albania was in danger. After subduing Wallachia and Morea, Mehmed, at the peak of his power, advanced toward the border of the League of Lesja, together with his general Balaban. In the west, there was some reluctance. The Pope was waiting for the initiative of European powers, but to no avail. Spurred on by reports in Morea, the Serene Republic of Venice was now secretly arranging its peace with the Sultan. Gjergj Kastrioti was alone. He had to do his best with the means at hand. In the middle of May 1466, Mehmed II crossed the border with a gargantuan army of 200,000. Unlike his father, who in the past ran straight to Kruja, Mehmed the Conqueror showed maturity. First, he would capture the small castles around the main fortress to create a safe zone. Only then would the Sultan start his main siege. The Ottomans would divide themselves in 2 forces. One fighting group would move through the valley of the Black Drin for the subjugation of the provinces of Dibra and Mati. While the rest would occupy Via Egnatia along the Shkumbin Valley. Mehmed's campaign was one of terror, where entire villages were burned and thousands of Albanians were killed or sold into slavery. Ottoman chroniclers exclaim, "Mehmed chopped off the heads of some. On his order, the others were split in half in front of him." The Ottoman massacres lasted for 2 months. One after the other fell the fortresses of Albania. All but one. Among the strongest castles of Albania, Krujë has a perimeter of 800 meters and is built on a rocky ridge separated from Tumanishti mountain. It is connected to the latter only from the east, where the main entrance is located. Krujë also does not lack water supplies from underground sources. The villages were emptied, while the walls were protected only by veteran soldiers. Legendary leader Vrana Conti had died years ago, so his role was filled by the nobleman Tanush Topia. Most of his soldiers were Albanians, while the foreign force included 1,000 Venetians and 200 Neapolitans, commanded by the Italian mercenary Baldassare Perduca of the Condottieri. In total, the garrison of Krujë numbered 4,400 soldiers. In the middle of June 1466, the first Turkish force under Ballaban Badera arrived. Balaban Pasha used to be one of Scanderbeg's subordinates. He administered Krujë, which was part of the Kastrioti family's possessions during Ottoman rule. The two men knew each other well, but in 1444, when Scanderbeg rebelled, Balaban sided with the Sultan. Here, in Krujë, he would find out if that had been the right choice. The Albanians did not hesitate and rushed from the main gate on the disorganized Ottoman troops, inflicting many casualties. A few days later, Sultan Mehmed II himself arrived with the rest of his army. Krujë was now surrounded by over 100,000 soldiers. Custom requires that the Sultan open negotiations. Tanush Topia was offered huge rewards if he surrendered. According to Barleti, the Albanian answer was as follows. Thus were negotiations concluded. Mehmet ordered the construction of siege engines on the spot. Bombards were cast and siege towers were built. The proud walls of Krujë began to shake under the fire from the Ottoman artillery. After the barrage came the assault. Most attacks came from the northwest. With the Ottomans using siege towers to overcome the walls. Meanwhile, the Albanians employed aggressive tactics, opening their gates to confront the enemy. This maneuver kept the Ottomans within range of cannons, arrows, and bullets. The Sultan perhaps could have taken the fortress by simply throwing more troops into the front line until the defenders were broken. But he knew it wouldn't be so easy. As soon as the Ottomans attacked the fortress, Scanderbeg suddenly appeared from the hills and fell upon the Ottoman camp. Mehmed the Conqueror was forced to call off the assault due to Scanderbeg's tactics, as according to Barleti, he caused only murder, destruction, and great material damage. As a result, the Ottoman camp was in a constant state of panic. The young sultan still had much to learn. After more than a month without any progress, a disappointed Mehmed decided to return to Istanbul. He assigned the continuation of the siege to Ballaban Badera with 80,000 soldiers. On his return, Mehmed built a fort on the ruins of Valmy, which he named Elbasan. But he was not yet finished. In the fortress of Chithna, inhabitants from surrounding villages had gathered along with several thousand of Scanderbeg soldiers for protection. Mehmed fell upon them, and despite Chithna's natural defenses, the castle was taken. Children, women, and the elderly were slaughtered, with the number of killed reaching 30,000. Krujë was still under siege by an enormous army. Despite guerrilla attacks, even Scanderbeg's troops were suffering losses. The situation reached a critical point, where the Albanian prince himself was forced to travel to Rome personally to seek aid. Scanderbeg turned to the Holy See, highlighting the services his sword had rendered as Athleta Christi. The Pope listened, concerned about the Ottoman threat, but other Italian states did not show a cooperative spirit due to their internal turmoil. At the beginning of January 1467, the First Council of Cardinals convened to discuss the situation in Albania, but without achieving concrete success for the League of Leisure. Meanwhile, news from Albania was dire. The siege of Krujë under Ballaban Pasha continued. In the early days of February, a messenger announced, "Ballaban Bey is very powerful in Albania and is crushing the countryside day after day. He has surrounded Krujë so fiercely that we can scarcely send them provisions." Scanderbeg wanted to return immediately, but some cardinals persuaded him to stay because they would reopen the Albanian issue. However, in the council on February 13th, nothing was achieved again. The Pope suggested that the cardinals donate to Scanderbeg, promising to reimburse them later. This idea was rejected because it seemed inappropriate to take loans from other cardinals while having enough money in the treasury. The debate also degenerated into personal grudges. Scanderbeg was deeply disappointed. A Milanese ambassador wrote, "He felt mocked. Thus, he decided immediately to depart in despair, saying that there couldn't be a greater cruelty in the world than that of the priests." Kastrioti left the next day, February 14th. He was so strapped for cash that he had to borrow money for his personal expenses in Rome. Rejected once again by the King of Naples, he set out for Albania. Upon his arrival, the situation changed immediately. At the beginning of April, the nobility gathered one last time in Leisure, where everything had started 24 years earlier. Among them was Lek Ducagini himself, convinced to join by Pal Anjali with his eloquence and diplomacy. Now, the absolute leadership of Gjergj Kastrioti was unquestioned. Ducagini brought 400 men and several thousand infantrymen. supplemented by 600 Italian soldiers and 4,000 local Albanians from the areas of Durrës, Shkodër, Lezhë, Drivast, Drisht, Tiva, and many others. In total, under Gjergj's command were around 13,400 men. He had performed miracles with much less. The Albanian counterattack begins now. The United League Army would march in 3 groups. Lech Dukagjini's forces would move together with the Venetian detachments, led by the Albanian from Shkodër, Nicol Moneta. They would pass through the Ionima forest. The 3rd group, under the command of Gjergj Kastrioti, would swing around the Korbin mountain to confront Balaban from the south. Under Scanderbeg's orders, the 3 army groups would converge on Krujë, completely surrounding their enemy. As Scanderbeg marched through the mountains, it was reported to him that a new Ottoman army was joining the siege. This was led by Ionima, Ballaban Badera's brother. Kastrioti acted immediately. He took the elite of the army, around 1,500 cavalry, and ambushed the Ottomans. The inexperienced Ionima was a quick meal for the battle-hardened Scanderbeg. Most of the army was massacred or fled. The Pasha himself was captured along with his son. Meanwhile, Balaban learned of the difficult situation he was in. Without supplies and surrounded, Krujë had to be taken now. A general assault began. The Albanians burst out again and fought fiercely in the narrow path before the main gate. The Turks were racing against time. Scanderbeg was very close. Kastrioti flags appeared on the horizon, along with Lech's and Moneta's troops. The Turks fought in desperation. Balaban was risking himself at the front, striving for a single victory against Scanderbeg. Among the men clashing fiercely, a hunter recognized the face of the Ottoman commander. Calmly, Gjergj Leshi aims his arquebus at Balaban Pasha and pulls the trigger. With the fall of their commander, the Ottoman soldiers lost their morale. The army began to retreat. Not knowing where to go, they gathered in the camp and fortified it as best as they could. With heavy losses on both sides, they could no longer continue. The next day, the siege was lifted. On St. George's Day, April 23, 1467, a triumphant Scanderbeg enters Krujë. The disorganized Ottoman mass moved south toward the Tirana plains. As they attempted to reach Ottoman lands, they realized that all the paths were blocked, guarded by Albanian parties who knew their terrain well. The invaders found themselves surrounded. Turkish emissaries promised to surrender all their weapons and loot on the condition that they be allowed to leave freely. Scanderbeg was inclined to accept, but in the war council, Lek Dukagini proposed attacking the enemy as soon as possible. His hot temper was reflected in the other commanders, who insisted that victory was certain. The leader's indecision gave the Ottomans time to break through one of the blocked paths and escape, with heavy losses. In response, the Albanian armies attacked the remaining Ottoman garrisons to regain lost territory. Only the fortress of Elbasan, with its high walls, could not be taken. Thus ended the most brutal siege of Kruja. Unprecedented in duration and savagery, this siege proved that even in the most difficult conditions, the Albanians could prevail. The divided nobles realized, albeit too late, that there could be no peace with the Ottomans, and that Gjergj Kastrioti was their only hope. Thus, when the Sultan returned, they would be ready to challenge him.